From collaborating with the US government to resistance fighting and even arguing in front of the Supreme Court, these are the stories of the fascinating Native Americans you don't hear about very often. For many years, Mangas Coloradas was one of the most important Mimbreno Apache figures living in what is now New Mexico. Born in the late 18th century, he was known for his large physical stature, and his name meant red sleeves. During Coloradas' time as the Mimbreno chief, officials from the US started encroaching on Apache territory. Coloradas was initially welcoming to the new settlers. Alas, things quickly broke down when the US Army soldiers began attacking Apache tribesmen. In response, Coloradas and the Apaches fought various elements of the US Army in a conflict known as the Apache Wars. Coloradas was the father-in-law of the Chiricahua Apache chief Cochise, and together their tribes fought the US Army. During the Battle of Apache Pass, they raided Fort Bowie, but this resulted in severe wounds to Coloradas. About 6 months later, he met with various U.S. officials to discuss peace. They brutally tortured and killed him. His death led to retribution from the Apaches, which only continued the cycle of violence. Hiawatha was likely born in the early 16th century and spent his formative years with the Onondaga and Mohawk tribes, though much of his life is shrouded in mystery. What is known is that he was instrumental in the creation of the Iroquois Confederacy, which lasted for about 200 years. Following a great personal tragedy involving the loss of his daughters, Hiawatha became a follower of the man who went by the name the Great Peacemaker. They convinced the Mohawks to join with Onondaga, of whom Hiawatha was now chief. They then convinced the Senecas, Cayugas, and Oneidas to join together to create the Five Nations. The Tuscarora would later join in 1722, and the Confederacy lasted until the late 18th century when the influx of white settlers forced the natives from their lands. Perhaps you're familiar with the name Hiawatha from the epic Henry Wadsworth Longfellow poem, The Song of Hiawatha, though that work actually has nothing to do with the historic Hiawatha.
I am sorry, Hiawatha.
Born in the mid-16th century, Opechancanough was a powerful chief of the Senecomica tribe. As chief, he was responsible for protecting the Pamunkey River from approaching enemies. Opechancanough was also responsible for the capture of Captain John Smith, but he treated him well and introduced him to his older brother, Chief Powhatan. Opechancanough later helped lead the Senecomica tribe during the Second and Third Anglo-Powhatan War against the English, which ended with Opechancanoug's capture and death in the 1640s. By that time, Opechancanough had already become the paramount chief of the Senecomica. To fight the English, he would use tactics to make them think he was friendly before launching a surprise attack that would result in the deaths of hundreds of colonists. The story of Dragging Canoe is one of the most important in Native American history. He lived in the late 18th century during the breakout of the Revolutionary War. He earned his name due to his dedication to being a skilled fighter, and by the time of the Revolution, he was one of the top Cherokee warriors. When the war broke out, he and his allies rejected a peace settlement with the colonists, instead deciding to attack them. Striking the colonists in multiple places at once, the Cherokee weren't powerful enough to drive them away, which led to a bloody defeat. As a result, Dragging Canoe and others established the Chickamauga offshoot to the Cherokee and continued to bring the fight to the colonists. The Chickamauga Cherokee under Dragging Canoe fought the Americans several more times and were able to defeat them and repel their attacks. The Chickamauga were ultimately successful at resisting the encroachment of the Americans. Dragging Canoe didn't die until March 1792 after the Revolution had ended, with much of his indigenous land still under Native control.
His leadership of the Chickamauga warriors fill the pages of countless histories.
Black Beaver was born in 1806 into the Delaware tribe in present-day Illinois. By 1834, he was already working as a guide and interpreter for various officers in the U.S. Army. In the 1840s, he formed Black Beaver's spy company, Indian Texas Mounted Volunteers, and they fought on the American side during the Mexican-American War. After the war, he continued to work as a scout, guide, and interpreter, eventually retiring near Fort Arbuckle just prior to the outbreak of the Civil War. During that time, Black Beaver remained loyal to the Union, helping officers to capture enemy prisoners of war. He also led a huge column of Union forces through miles of treacherous Confederate territory from Fort Cobb to Fort Leavenworth. Later in life, Black Beaver would become a Christian and Baptist minister, and he eventually died in 1880. In the 1950s, he became the inaugural entrant into the American Indian Hall of Fame. For many Americans, the name Santa Anna is synonymous with the Texas Revolution and the Battle of the Alamo, but there was also an important Penatucket Comanche chief who went by the same name. He was likely born near the turn of the 19th century and lived in present-day Texas. This Santa Anna initially feared the encroachment of U.S. settlers onto Comanche territory, and he participated in several battles to try and stop them. But in 1846, he agreed to a peace treaty, although he wasn't fully mollified. But then he traveled to the capital at Washington, D.C., and something changed. Upon his return, he started advocating for accommodation for the settlers. This didn't make Santa Anna very popular among his fellow Comanches, and he may have tried to rehabilitate his image by leading attacks in Mexico. He died in 1849 from a cholera epidemic, leaving his tribe to splinter apart. Ely Parker was born in 1828 on the Tonawanda Reservation in New York. He later attended the Cayuga Academy School, where he experienced tribulations but still got a good education. After a few years, he was educated enough to be able to help the Tonawanda Seneca in their negotiations with the U.S. government. Parker later attempted to be a lawyer but was unable due to legalized discrimination owing to his Native American heritage. While not an official lawyer, he still helped argue Native American cases before the Supreme Court, and he was even successful a number of times. Despite the odds, he even became an engineer. During the Civil War, Parker's friend Ulysses S. Grant made him an engineer in the Union Army of Tennessee, and he also later became Grant's military secretary. He helped to write the terms of surrender that ended the Civil War and served as the Native American Commissioner of Indian Affairs under Grant during his presidency. Parker died in 1895 of natural causes. He worked both for Wall Street and the New York City Police Department before his passing and died with full military honors.
He left behind a great legacy of strength, perseverance, and dedication, and all of that in the face of some very daunting odds.
Weetamoo was a 17th century chief of the Pecasset Wampanoag tribe and a great warrior. Born in the 1630s, she was both a bead worker and a dancer in her tribe, and she earned a great deal of respect. As a chief, she came into contact with intrusive English settlers and constantly fought for the rights of her fellow tribespeople to remain on their land. After her husband Wamsuta's death, possibly from poisoning, Weetamoo remarried several times, and she soon found herself in the midst of King Philip's War. By the time the conflict broke out in 1675, she was married to her fifth and final husband, and she was active in the fight against the English. In 1676, she participated in the Lancaster Raid, which resulted in the kidnapping of Mary Rowlandson, who would later write a book about her experiences. Weetamoo would eventually be killed during the Battle of Mount Hope in August 1676. She was beheaded, and her head was put on display as a warning to other warriors. An important Creek warrior during the early 19th century, William Weatherford was born in Alabama. Around the time that he was 30, he became embroiled in the Civil War that broke out among the Creek Confederacy. He fought on the side of the Red Sticks and took part in the assault on Fort Mims in 1813. The assault dramatically expanded the scope of the war, and soon Weatherford and the Red Sticks found themselves facing down the barrels of the U.S. infantry. Though they fought bravely, they were eventually forced to surrender. Due to his cooperation with American forces as well as the high-status position of his family, Weatherford largely escaped retribution for his acts during the war. He would end his life as a slave owner in 1824, still living in Alabama. After his death, he was also known by the name Red Eagle. He's best remembered for the attack on Fort Mims, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds and the forced imprisonment of women, children, and slaves. Pushmataha was born in the mid-18th century in what is now Mississippi as a member of the Choctaw tribe, who were constantly fighting with the rival Creeks. By 1800, he'd risen to position of Choctaw chief. At the time when the United States was expanding and slowly ripping away indigenous lands, Pushmataha negotiated with U.S. officials as a Choctaw representative. He actually fought on the side of future President Andrew Jackson during the Creek War of 1813 to 1814. But he eventually discovered that his support didn't mean that the government would be any more conciliatory towards him and his tribe. Forced to continually cede land, in 1820, Pushmataha tried to get his old friend Jackson to come to better terms, but instead he was forced to sign a lopsided treaty. While attempting to renegotiate a few years later, in 1824, Pushmataha died after developing a respiratory infection. In recognition of his aid to the U.S. Army, he was given full military honors for his burial. His legacy also endures as the namesake of a community in Alabama.
The community of Pushmataha in northwestern Choctaw County is named in his honor.
Yonaguska, also known as Drowning Bear, was a Cherokee chief in the 19th century in North Carolina. Living at a time when Americans were snatching up indigenous territory left and right, Drowning Bear was one of the few who initially advocated for conciliation with the U.S. government. He was also known for adopting the white American merchant William Holland Thomas as his son. Although Drowning Bear advocated for peace with the U.S., by the 1830s he was against giving up any more territory to encroaching Americans. In 1837, he was able to negotiate an agreement that allowed his tribe of Cherokee, the Oconaluftee, to remain in North Carolina while the rest of the Cherokee were removed farther west. He then became an ally of the U.S., helping them enforce the removal against the non-Oconaluftee Cherokee. While at the time his work with the U.S. government may have been condemned, it ended up allowing the Oconaluftee to stay in North Carolina while other tribes had to leave their native lands and push west. He died in 1839 when he was about 80. Also known as Brown Weasel Woman, Running Eagle was one of the fiercest warriors of the Piikani Blackfeet tribe. She was born in the early 19th century, and she was interested in hunting from a young age. She quickly learned the ways of being a Native American warrior under the tutelage of her father. At one point, she risked her life to save him after he was severely injured by an enemy war party during a buffalo hunt. After losing both of her parents, Running Eagle started living with another indigenous woman and took over care of her entire family. She also started joining war parties that were directed at their enemies, mainly the Crow. She became instrumental in helping the Piikani capture horses from the Crow, which helped her earn the name of Running Eagle, a prestigious Piikani title. It's unfortunate that Running Eagle is not more well known to the average high school graduate, as she played an influential role for women among her tribe. She died sometime around 1878 in a battle against the Flathead Warriors.